The first sign that something was wrong wasn't the alarms. It was the reflection. Ethan Cole noticed it at 2:13 in the morning, standing alone in Containment Lab 3. The glass wall in front of him showed his face, pale under sterile lighting, jaw tight, pupils slightly dilated from the sedative still tapering out of his bloodstream. He blinked. The reflection blinked a fraction of a second later. Ethan froze. He leaned closer to the glass. The man in the reflection leaned too. But the delay was there again. Small. Barely measurable. Wrong. Behind him, the monitoring equipment hummed softly. Rows of servers processed the real-time sequencing data of his genome, the most expensive, most classified biological experiment ever approved. Dragon DNA. That's what they'd called it in the briefing. Not mythological. Not fantasy. Recovered from an object discovered deep beneath Antarctic permafrost, a fossilized structure that wasn't bone, but something older. Denser. Preserved beyond reason. Its molecular structure had been impossible. Self-correcting. Adaptive. Alive in a way dead things should never be. They had sequenced fragments. Then synthesized them. Then, after years of containment debates and military oversight, they'd injected it into him. Volunteer. Test subject. Asset. He exhaled slowly, fogging the glass. This time, the reflection did not fog. Ethan stepped back sharply. The glass remained clear. Behind him, a pen rolled off the steel counter and clattered to the floor. He hadn't touched it. He stared down at it. The lab was sealed. No airflow. No vibrations. The pen trembled slightly. Then stopped. Vital stable, Dr. Myra Vance's voice came through the ceiling speakers. Calm. Controlled. Watching. Heart rate elevated. Adrenaline spike detected. Ethan swallowed. Yeah, he muttered. You think? There was a pause. We're reading mild electromagnetic interference within a 1-meter radius of you, Myra continued. That's new. How new? It started approximately 30 seconds ago. That was when the reflection blinked late. Ethan flexed his hands slowly. They felt normal. No scales. No claws. No sudden transformation. Just warmth beneath his skin. A steady, growing heat. Am I mutating? He asked. No abnormal morphological changes, Myra replied. Your DNA sequencing is. She stopped. Ethan looked toward the nearest camera lens. My DNA is what? It's fluctuating. That's not a reassuring word, Doctor. The wall monitor beside him flickered. The genome display spiraled across the screen in glowing strands of blue and gold. The gold wasn't there before. The strands twisted. Then rearranged themselves. Not randomly. Deliberately. Ethan felt something shift behind his eyes. Not pain. Pressure. As if something enormous had turned its attention toward him from very far away. He blinked again. The room dimmed slightly. The overhead lights didn't go out. They just seemed less certain. Gravity pulled harder against his shoulders. He staggered. Gravity variance detected, Myra said sharply now. The calm was gone. Local increase of 0.2 G centered on subject Cole. Subject. Not Ethan anymore. He grabbed the edge of the counter. The metal dented under his fingers. He stared down at it. I didn't squeeze, he whispered. We're not reading abnormal muscular exertion, Myra said. The deformation appears to be environmental compression. Environmental. Not him. Around him. The pen on the floor lifted 1 centimeter into the air. Hovered. Then dropped. The clocks on the far wall blinked simultaneously. 2:16. 2:17. 2:16. 2:19. Time hiccuped. Every monitor in the lab glitched at once, static rippling across screens like disturbed water. Ethan's reflection in the glass stepped forward. He did not. His stomach dropped. The reflection leaned close to the surface of the glass and tilted its head. Curious. Ethan spun around. Nothing behind him. When he looked back, the reflection matched him perfectly again. His breath came faster. Myra, he said carefully, tell me what you're seeing. Silence. Too long. Myra? We're seeing space-time distortion at a microscopic scale, she answered finally. Localized. Contained. But increasing. Ethan's heartbeat thudded in his ears. This was supposed to change my biology, he said. It did. The genome display shifted again. The gold strands overtook the blue entirely. Then they stabilized. Not chaotic. Organized. Ethan felt the pressure in his skull intensify. And then something clicked. A memory. Not his. Sky. Endless burning sky. Wings casting shadows over continents. Stars bending closer. He gasped and dropped to one knee. The floor beneath him rippled outward in concentric waves, like a stone dropped into still water. The lab wall bulged. Not breaking. Bending. Myra, someone shouted over comms in the background. The building's foundation sensors are reading compression stress. Ethan slammed his palm against the floor instinctively. Stop. The ripple froze mid-wave. The distortion stilled. The air snapped back into place with a subtle pop. Gravity normalized. Silence flooded the lab. Ethan knelt there, staring at his hand. He hadn't forced anything. He hadn't exerted strength. He had commanded. The genome display no longer fluctuated. It glowed steadily gold. Myra's voice returned, very quiet now. Ethan. Yeah. We didn't just alter your DNA. He looked slowly toward the glass wall again. His reflection moved in perfect sync now. But its eyes. They glowed faintly amber. We altered the constants around you. Ethan stood slowly. The air hummed faintly. The world felt thinner. Negotiable. Behind the reinforced glass, Myra stared at him with something that wasn't fear. It was realization. Outside the lab, deep in orbit, 3 satellites simultaneously drifted half a degree off their predicted paths. Inside the room, Ethan exhaled carefully. The air shimmered. And the wall behind him rippled like water again. They thought they were rewriting his body. They were wrong. Something ancient had just remembered how the universe used to work. The building went into lockdown at 2:21. Not because Ethan tried to escape. Because the walls stopped trusting themselves. Containment Lab 3 sealed with a hydraulic hiss. Reinforced blast shutters slid over the observation windows. The hum of the facility deepened as backup generators engaged automatically. Ethan stood in the center of the room, breathing slowly. The air shimmered faintly around him, like heat distortion rising from asphalt. Only the lab temperature had dropped 3 degrees. Ethan, Dr. Myra Vance said through the intercom, her voice tight but controlled. I need you to remain still. I'm not exactly juggling chainsaws in here, he muttered. His pulse had steadied. But something else hadn't. He could feel it now. A second heartbeat. Not in his chest. In the room. A low, structural hum that synced faintly with his breathing. The metal table to his left creaked. Ethan glanced at it. The stainless steel surface bowed inward by a millimeter. Then 2. Stress readings are spiking, someone said faintly over Myra's open MIC localized gravitational increase. How much? Myra demanded. 0.5 G, no, 0.8. Ethan's knees buckled. He caught himself against the counter again. The dent from earlier had deepened. I'm not doing this, he said. We know, Myra replied quickly. Your muscular output hasn't changed. The environment is adjusting. Adjusting. To him. The floor beneath Ethan's boots cracked, not from impact, but from compression. Fine fractures spidered outward in a perfect circle around him. A loose clipboard on a distant desk slid toward him across the floor. Not rolled. Dragged. Metal objects followed. Paper clips trembled and skittered across surfaces, clinging to his boots like filings to a magnet. Electromagnetic field is intensifying, Myra said. He's emitting a fluctuating polarity pattern. I don't even know what that means, Ethan said through clenched teeth. It means the lab is reorganizing itself around you. The overhead lights flickered. This time, not dimming. Changing color. White shifted to gold. Then to a deep, molten amber. Ethan's breath caught. The color felt familiar. Not visually. Instinctively. He lifted his hand. The air around his fingers bent. Not visibly at first. Then subtly, like space had become elastic. The camera feed on the far wall glitched. For half a second, Ethan's shadow on the floor stretched backward. Unnaturally long. And it had wings. The image snapped back. Ethan stared at the floor. My shadow, he whispered. We saw it, Myra said. Good. That's comforting. Another tremor ran through the building. This one wasn't localized. The seismic monitors in the facility lit up in cascading alerts. External satellites are reporting orbital drift, someone shouted in the background. Myra's voice sharpened. Drift how? Minor. But simultaneous across 3 assets. Ethan swallowed. That wasn't possible. Unless gravity itself had hiccuped. The wall monitor to his right flickered again. The digital clock read 2:23, 2:24, 2:23, 2:26. Time folded in on itself for a heartbeat. Ethan blinked, and suddenly he wasn't in the lab. He was standing beneath a sky that burned. Not metaphorically. Actually burned. Crimson clouds stretched across a horizon filled with massive silhouettes in flight. Wings. Hundreds of them. The air tasted metallic and hot. He could feel the pull of something enormous overhead, a star too close. Then, the vision snapped. He was back in the lab, gasping. Brain activity spike, Myra said. Ethan, what did you see? Memory, he breathed. But not mine. The genome display shifted again. Gold patterns rippled across the screen, complex, layered, geometric. The helix wasn't just encoding protein structures. It was encoding ratios. Constants. Numbers appeared briefly across the monitor, mathematical values Ethan vaguely recognized from high school physics. Gravitational constant. Fine structure constant. Electromagnetic coupling ratios. They flickered. Changed by fractions. Then stabilized. Myra's voice went very quiet. That's not possible. What? Ethan asked. The constants updated. Updated. The system auto-compares physical constants in the lab environment to global baselines, she said. For reference stability. And for 2.3 seconds, they were different. The metal cabinet across the room suddenly groaned and bent inward toward Ethan before snapping back violently. A glass panel exploded outward, shards freezing midair. Not falling. Hanging. Ethan stared at them. They floated in perfect suspension. Every fragment glinting in golden light. His heart pounded. I didn't tell them to stop, he whispered. Your heart rate spiked, Myra said. Then stabilized. The shards trembled. Then gently settled to the floor. Gravity normalized. The golden light overhead faded back to sterile white. The hum in the room quieted. Silence. Ethan stood in the center of a cracked floor surrounded by warped metal and shattered glass. The cameras refocused on him. Containment breach probability is increasing, someone muttered in the control room. Myra ignored them. Ethan, she said carefully. You're not mutating in a traditional sense. He let out a dry laugh. That's reassuring. The dragon DNA isn't rewriting your biology. He looked down at his hands. The veins beneath his skin pulsed faintly with amber light. Then dimmed. What is it doing? He asked. Myra hesitated. Then said it anyway. It's recalibrating the environment to match itself. Ethan's stomach dropped. Meaning? Meaning, she said slowly, physics appears to be negotiable in your proximity. The wall behind him rippled again, this time wider. Not just a wave. A distortion. For half a second, the lab extended impossibly deep, as if space had stretched like taffy. Then snapped back. The alarms finally triggered. Facility-wide. Red lights. Evacuation protocols. Military oversight notification. Ethan closed his eyes. The second heartbeat in the room grew louder. Ancient. Heavy. Not threatening. Authoritative. A presence pressed gently against his consciousness. Not a voice. A certainty. The world around him trembled again. Gravity surged. Then stabilized. Metal stopped bending. Time resumed linear flow. Silence returned. Ethan opened his eyes slowly. The air felt compliant. As if it were waiting. Myra, he said quietly. Yes. I don't think it's breaking. A pause. Then what is it doing? Ethan looked at the fractured lab around him. The warped steel. The suspended dust particles. The faint golden glow still threading through his veins. It's remembering, he said. And somewhere far above Earth's atmosphere. Space bent. Just slightly. As if something long dormant had begun adjusting the universe back to an older blueprint. They moved Ethan underground. Level 9. No windows. No external signal bleed. Walls layered with composite alloys designed to absorb electromagnetic fluctuation, radiation spikes, and, according to a nervous engineer, unknown exotic anomalies. Ethan found that description funny. Until the walls started humming again. He sat alone in the center of the reinforced chamber, wrists resting loosely on his knees. No restraints. They had tried restraints for 8 seconds. The titanium bands liquefied. Not melted. Liquefied. As if the molecular bonds had decided they preferred being something else. Baseline stable for now, Dr. Myra Vance said from the observation deck above. Gravitational field normalized. EM output minimal. For now, Ethan repeated. He felt clearer. The golden pulse in his veins had steadied into a slow rhythm. The second heartbeat, whatever it was, no longer thundered. It lingered. Patient. Waiting. A large holographic display activated in front of him, live genome mapping again. The gold helix spun lazily in midair. Your DNA has stopped fluctuating, Myra said. It's locked into a new configuration. Permanent? He asked. We don't know. Ethan stared at the rotating structure. It didn't look biological anymore. It looked architectural. LAD geometry embedded within the helix, angles and ratios repeating at fractal scales. Not code for flesh. Code for something larger. He closed his eyes. And the memory returned. This time it didn't crash into him. It unfolded. A planet, not Earth. Vast oceans of mineral-rich vapor. Sky-tinged bronze beneath a swollen star. Massive shapes rising from continents shaped like blades. Dragons. Not beasts. Not animals. Anchors. Each one radiated subtle distortions into the atmosphere, stabilizing turbulence, regulating pressure, bending gravity along coastlines to prevent tectonic fracture. They weren't rulers in the mythic sense. They were constants. Ethan gasped and opened his eyes. Myra. Yes? They weren't just a species. Silence from above. What do you mean? They were part of the system. The holographic DNA display brightened as if responding to his thoughts. Their biology-encoded ratios, Ethan continued. Gravitational tolerances. Electromagnetic harmonics. They weren't adapting to physics. He swallowed. Physics adapted to them. The observation deck went quiet. That's not possible, someone whispered. Ethan shook his head slowly. When they went extinct. The memory shifted violently. The bronze star swelling. Oceans evaporating. Dragon forms collapsing one by one as environmental ratios destabilized beyond recovery. And then, the distortion spread outward. Subtle. But measurable. Orbital drift in neighboring systems. Slight constant deviations. Micro-instabilities compounding across millennia. When they died, Ethan said softly, the universe lost its stabilizers. Myra's breath caught audibly over the speakers. You're suggesting that extinction didn't just kill them. He looked up at the reinforced ceiling. It destabilized reality. The room temperature dipped 1 degree. The walls trembled faintly. Not from threat. Recognition. On the holographic display, several universal constants appeared again. Baseline values for gravity, charge coupling, atomic spacing ratios. Each flickered. Adjusted by infinitesimal fractions. Then returned. Myra's voice came back strained. We're detecting microvariances in vacuum fluctuation levels. Just inside this chamber. Ethan stood slowly. The golden pulse in his veins brightened. He lifted his hand, and the air above his palm folded inward like soft fabric. Not violently. Precisely. He concentrated. The distortion sharpened into a clean geometric plane. A ripple in space itself. He exhaled and let it flatten again. You're controlling it, Myra whispered. No, Ethan said quietly. I'm aligning it. An alarm blared suddenly. Not from inside the chamber. From above. Structural failure in Corridor B, someone shouted. Containment wall collapse. The ceiling groaned. Concrete cracked. A section of reinforced plating tore free and began falling toward Ethan. Time stretched. Not slowed. Stretched. The falling slab distorted midair, edges blurring as gravity around it twisted. Ethan didn't panic. He didn't shout. He just raised his hand. Hold. The word wasn't spoken aloud. It resonated. The slab froze in place. Not hovering because gravity vanished. Hovering because gravity was redirected. Balanced. Perfectly. Dust hung suspended around it like a constellation. Silence fell over level 9. Every instrument reading spiked. Then stabilized. Ethan lowered his hand slowly. The slab eased back into position against the fractured ceiling, resealing itself with an audible click as molecular bonds realigned. The crack in the concrete smoothed. Repaired. Myra stared down through the observation glass, speechless. Ethan looked at his reflection in the reinforced barrier. His eyes glowed amber now, not brightly. Steadily. Reality isn't breaking, he said. He could feel it clearly now, the blueprint beneath existence. The ratios humming like strings on a cosmic instrument. It's remembering. Above the facility, satellites drifted back into perfect orbit alignment. Deep space telescopes registered a slight reduction in background radiation variance, too small to trigger alarm, but large enough to recalibrate models. And somewhere far beyond Earth, in the vacuum between stars, a faint, ancient fluctuation pulsed. Something had noticed the realignment. Back in level 9, Ethan flexed his fingers. The golden helix rotated calmly before him. He wasn't becoming a dragon. He wasn't becoming a monster. He was becoming a reference point. A constant. And for the first time since the injection, the universe felt less fragile. Not because it was stable. Because it had something to stabilize around again. The first global anomaly hit at 4:12 Universal Time Coordinated. Not in the lab. Not underground. In the sky. Weather satellites over the Pacific registered a cyclonic storm system reversing its rotation for exactly 9 seconds. Meteorologists assumed corrupted data. Until it happened again. And again. Across 3 different hemispheres. In level 9, every screen lit up at once. Dr. Myra Vance didn't look away from Ethan. It's spreading, she said quietly. Ethan felt it too. The second heartbeat wasn't confined to the chamber anymore. It pulsed outward. Like a tuning fork struck against the bones of the planet. I'm not pushing it, he said. We know. Global physics baselines flickered. The fine structure constant dipped by an immeasurable fraction. Returned. Dipped again. High-orbit satellites wobbled, micro-corrections firing constantly to compensate. In a materials lab in Germany, a steel beam phased half a centimeter out of visible space before snapping back. In Tokyo, a digital clock displayed 13 hours 61 minutes for 3 seconds. Across the Sahara, a lightning strike curved backward into the clouds. Governments didn't call it a glitch. They called it an event. Back underground, Ethan stood in the center of the chamber, jaw tight. His emotions were leaking into the world. Not violently, but measurably. Heart rate elevated, Myra said. I know. The walls around him shimmered faintly, microfractures appearing and sealing in rapid sequence. I need to isolate, he said. You're already isolated. Not physically. He closed his eyes. And felt the fractures. They weren't cracks in stone. They were inconsistencies in ratio. Places where the constants disagreed with themselves. Tiny. But multiplying. The dragon DNA pulsed brighter inside him. Not aggressive. Corrective. It wanted alignment. It wanted order. But it didn't distinguish between stability and dominance. That was the difference. Dragons had ruled by imposing their blueprint onto reality. He could feel the temptation now. To increase gravity uniformly across tectonic fault lines. To stabilize weather systems permanently. To harden atomic bonds against entropy. He could fix things. All of it. But at what cost? The memory surfaced again. Bronze skies. A civilization that optimized their environment so completely that change became catastrophic. Control had replaced adaptability. When the star shifted, they didn't bend. They broke. Ethan inhaled slowly. Myra. Yes. If I force alignment, globally, it'll stop the fractures. Her silence lasted 2 seconds too long. And, she asked. And nothing will change again. In the observation deck, every scientist went still. The chamber lights dimmed slightly, not from malfunction. From anticipation. You'd freeze evolution, Myra said. Not intentionally. But effectively. He opened his eyes. The air around him vibrated with subtle golden harmonics. He could feel storm systems bending slightly toward his internal rhythm. Tectonic stress lines easing. Electromagnetic noise smoothing. The world wanted him to choose. Stability. Or freedom. A tremor ran through the chamber. This one stronger. Outside the facility, the sky above Nevada fractured visually for half a second, like a pane of glass under stress. Cameras captured it. Social media exploded. The military moved to DEFCON 3. Containment failure probability rising, someone reported. Ethan clenched his fists. The golden pulse flared. And gravity in the chamber spiked sharply. Equipment collapsed inward. The observation glass cracked. Ethan. Myra shouted. He exhaled sharply. Not dominance, he whispered. The spike stopped instantly. The glass reformed. Gravity normalized. He stepped backward. Away from the center of the chamber. The distortion field followed him. Then slowed. Then stabilized. He understood now. It wasn't his anger causing fractures. It was intensity. The more he asserted, the more reality bent. Dragons ruled through overwhelming presence. Humans survived through restraint. He forced his pulse to steady. Lower. Calmer. The golden glow dimmed to a soft shimmer. On global monitors, the storm systems returned to natural rotation. Satellite orbits stabilized. Electromagnetic noise fell back within tolerances. The fracture in the Nevada sky sealed like cooling glass. Myra exhaled audibly. Global variance returning to baseline. Ethan nodded slowly. I can't impose alignment. You just prevented collapse, she said. He shook his head. No. I prevented control. He looked up at her through the reinforced barrier. Dragons ruled by dominance. The golden helix pulsed faintly behind his eyes. Humans rule by control. Not suppression. Not force. Balance. He stepped toward the far edge of the chamber. The distortion field tightened around him, shrinking to a 2-meter radius. Localized. Contained. I need distance from dense population centers, he said quietly. Myra's expression shifted. You're talking about leaving. If I stay, he replied, every emotional spike becomes a global variable. Above them, intelligence agencies debated evacuation plans. Missile contingencies. Worst-case scenarios. Ethan felt none of that panic now. Only clarity. I won't be a fracture event, he said. The golden pulse steadied. Outside the facility, the world returned to normal physics. For now. But in deep space. Sensors beyond Pluto detected a subtle anomaly. A thin rift forming in vacuum itself. Not tearing. Observing. Something else had felt the realignment. And it was moving closer. Back underground, Ethan felt it too. A distant pressure. Not hostile. Curious. The dragon DNA brightened faintly in response. The universe was adjusting. Not collapsing. But responding. And the next fracture wouldn't be an accident. It would be a choice. The rift opened beyond Pluto. Not violently. Not like a wound. Like an eye. Deep space telescopes picked it up first, a distortion against the cosmic microwave background, perfectly circular, expanding at a measured rate. No radiation spike. No debris. Just absence bending inward. In level 9, every screen went dark except one. A live feed of the anomaly. Ethan didn't need the visuals. He felt it. The second heartbeat inside him synchronized instantly with the rhythm of the rift. It wasn't random. It wasn't an invasion. It was recognition. They noticed, he said quietly. Dr. Myra Vance stepped closer to the observation glass. What is it? Ethan closed his eyes. And saw. Not ships. Not creatures. Structures. Enormous, geometric constructs woven into vacuum itself. Lattices of dark energy and gravitational symmetry. Ancient. Patient. Existing in the spaces between forces. Observers. When the dragons had anchored reality, these entities had remained distant, balanced against them. When the dragons vanished, the universe destabilized slightly. And the observers had drifted closer. Now something had reactivated the old blueprint. And they were evaluating the anomaly. Evaluating him. They don't like imbalance, Ethan said. Are they hostile? Myra asked. No. He opened his eyes slowly. They're corrective. On the main screen, the rift pulsed once. Space-time fluctuations rippled outward, brushing the heliosphere like wind across water. Satellites trembled in orbit. Across Earth, auroras flared at the equator. Gravity dipped by a fraction of a percent. The dragon DNA ignited within him, not painful, not uncontrolled. Complete. Every golden strand in his genome locked into perfect alignment. The second heartbeat merged with his own. No longer separate. Unified. Ethan stepped to the center of the chamber. I can seal it, he said. Myra's voice tightened. At what cost? He already knew. If he imposed full draconic alignment across the solar system, the rift would close instantly. But evolution would narrow. Change would slow. Humanity would stabilize permanently. No more unpredictable cosmic variance. No more catastrophic randomness. But no more organic growth either. Dragons had chosen dominance. He would not. He extended both hands outward. The air around him shimmered into layered geometry, visible ratios unfolding in three-dimensional space. Gravitational vectors bent like threads. Electromagnetic harmonics hummed in golden arcs. The chamber dissolved. Not physically. Perceptually. He stood now in orbit above Earth. Not in body. In presence. The rift loomed beyond the outer system, a vast, dark iris watching. He reached toward it, not with force. With calibration. The observers reacted immediately. The rift widened. A counter-frequency rippled outward, testing him. Ethan felt the strain. He could overpower it. The dragon blueprint offered that path easily. Instead, he adjusted. Reduced his harmonic amplitude. Matched theirs. Not dominant. Complementary. The rift trembled. For the first time, its expansion slowed. Ethan shifted his internal constants again, micro-adjustments to gravitational balance, fine structure variance, vacuum energy fluctuation. He didn't overwrite the universe. He synchronized with it. Earth's magnetosphere brightened faintly. Solar wind stabilized. The observers recalibrated in response. The tension in space eased. The rift began to shrink. Not sealed by force. Closed by equilibrium. In level 9, Myra watched atmospheric models normalize in real time. Deep space sensors reported vacuum fluctuation returning to baseline. Energy spikes stabilizing, an analyst whispered. In orbit, Ethan felt the observers withdraw. Not defeated. Satisfied. The rift collapsed into a pinpoint. Then vanished. Silence flooded the solar system. Ethan hovered above Earth in golden light. He felt every tectonic plate. Every storm. Every flicker of human neural activity across billions of minds. He could tighten it all. Perfect it. Instead, he let it breathe. He allowed slight variance. Minor unpredictability. Room for chaos. Room for growth. The dragon DNA settled fully into his being, not as ruler. As reference. As constant. Myra's voice echoed faintly in his awareness. Ethan? He smiled gently. I'm still here. But he wasn't in the chamber anymore. His physical body stood motionless in level 9, eyes glowing amber, heartbeat steady. Then light enveloped him. Not explosive. Quiet. When it faded, the chamber was empty. No ash. No residue. Just stable air. Outside, the stars above Earth appeared subtly sharper. Gravitational models across the solar system recalculated. Not dramatically. But enough. Earth's orbital path stabilized against long-term perturbations. Cosmic radiation levels dipped slightly. Storm volatility reduced by a fraction. Not controlled. Just, resilient. Weeks later, physicists noticed something they couldn't explain. The universal constants hadn't changed. But they fluctuated less. Entropy still existed. Chaos still thrived. But beneath it, there was resistance. A gentle correction. A quiet balance. They never found Ethan Cole's body. But sometimes, in the upper atmosphere during intense solar storms, a faint amber shimmer appears. Satellites pass through it and return slightly more stable than expected. Deep space probes detect fewer anomalies than models predict. The universe is not frozen. Not dominated. Not rewritten. It is steadier. Because they injected dragon DNA into a human. And instead of creating a weapon, they created a constant.